Classified, your one-stop shop for all things Group of 5 college football. Stepping up to the microphone are your hosts, Gabe Kuhn and Kyron Samuels. Now, let's talk some G5 football.
G5 Classified episode 13 is upon you. Gabe Kuhn with my co-host Kyron Samuels. We have a lot on the show today. We'll get to the college football playoff rankings in just a second. I want to talk about a certain team from the SEC's resume and go by the numbers to try to prove a point. We'll talk about the Indiana-Ohio State game coming up this weekend, get to our winners and losers, but we have a guest today, a very, very big guest. Today we have the Senior Bowl executive director, Jim Nagy. He will join the show, and then we'll get to our G5 portion of the pod. But Kyron, what's happening, brother? How's it going?
Going pretty good, man. Happy to be here. Wasn't the most eventful college football weekend, but it's still a good group of topics to talk about. So I'm happy to get into it and kind of preview for the next week coming up.
Yeah, so the college football playoff rankings are always the topic at this time of year. So let's go ahead and get into those. Stop the presses. Go ahead and throw them up for me, Kenny, at this moment. No real change in the top 5. You have Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, Penn State, then Indiana. So 4 of the top 5 teams are from the Big Ten. Then to round it all out, the top 12, Notre Dame at 6, Alabama 7, Miami 8, Ole Miss at number 9, Georgia at number 10, Tennessee at 11 after the loss to Georgia, and then Boise State at 12. The way it would shake out right now, as far as the bracket is concerned, Boise State would get that first round bye as the number 4 seed, Miami at number 3, Texas at number 2, 1, Oregon. But obviously that depends on who wins conference championships. Then the matchups themselves, number 12, BYU versus Ohio State, number 5. Alabama, number 9 versus 8, Notre Dame. 11, Georgia versus 6, Penn State. That would be on the road in the winter. Very interesting conversations to be had about that. Number 10, Ole Miss at number 7, Indiana. Kai, holler at me. Let me know what you think.
Well, before we get into the actual rankings, I would just like to say that would be best case scenario for both Georgia and Ohio State. If that bracket were to shake out and Ohio State would get to host the game against BYU at the Horseshoe and then go to Boise to play Boise State. I'm not disrespecting either one of those teams. I think those are 2 good football teams. But for Ohio State, if you talk about the path of least resistance, if you talk about the easiest road to getting to a semifinal game, it would be to go host the game against BYU and then take a road trip to Boise and play Boise State. All the respect in the world to GT, all the respect in the world to Maddox Madsen and some of those guys that have improved as the years gone along. But they have earned the right to be respected as they are. But that would easily be the easiest road for any team in the college football playoff. And then looking at Georgia, it's going to be cold in State College. It's going to be a respectable game. You have those running backs, right?
Right.
You have Kodo Nicky, who on any given day could dial it up and give you some fits. But going to Penn State and then going to Miami will be ideal for Georgia, especially after the season that they played. They've been on the road to Alabama. They've been on the road to Texas. They've been on the road to Ole Miss. They played neutral site against Florida and Clemson. That's not going to phase them. Maybe the weather would be a little bit of a challenge early on, but that's going to be a physical run-the-rock game where they're not going to overly rely on Carson Beck anyway, if that were to shake out. So that would be perfect for those teams. And then getting to the nitty-gritty of the actual rankings, I don't have too many overwhelming problems with the rankings. I just hate the inconsistencies in the response to them. I mean, let's look at a team like let's go to Missouri, for example.
Right.
I think Missouri should be a top 25 team. Probably not. I mean, they're 7-3. They don't have any great wins. They have the best win is probably Vanderbilt or a non-conference game.
But they've beaten 4 teams that will be bowl teams that are bowl eligible.
4 teams that will be bowl teams. A Buffalo team that can win the MAC potentially. Boston College is a team that they beat. Vanderbilt is a team that they beat. They beat some solid teams, right? Why are we so hell-bent on getting Missouri out of there without acknowledging the fact that Illinois and UNLV have squeaked in?
100%.
It's clear resume boosters here. I love UNLV program. Barry Odom, friend of the show. Ricky White, Jackson Woodard, all those guys. What have they done since the Boise State loss to justify re-entering the top 25? It's a clear position to prop up Boise State's resume. Illinois, their best win is Nebraska, who's 5-5. What have they done to re-enter the top 25? They just beat a very bad Michigan State team. Was the Michigan State win enough? Who's going to finish with a losing record? Is that a win that is good enough to prop them back to the top 25? There's inconsistencies with how we respond and react to this. Even looking at a team like Georgia. Georgia should be pissed off that they're ranked number 10. I mean, if you look at the teams in front of them, you know who else has a fair gripe? Army. Everybody talks about the games have to matter. Everybody talks about win your games and you get respected. Why is Army ranked number 19 and they're undefeated, getting ready to play Notre Dame? Why are they behind a team like Miami, who has a bad loss to a Georgia Tech team that they haven't played a team with the winning, they haven't beat a team with the winning record yet? I mean, look at Notre Dame. They have the loss to NIU. Why is Notre Dame not being hounded? I think people should just say they hate SEC. They hate.
Yes, I'm with you.
This way for so long, and I can understand that to a T, 100%. But the reactions and then the dissertations, and we get the columns from national analysts that are picking at SEC schools, but not acknowledging Indiana should be ranked ahead of Penn State, who's in their very own conference.
There's inconsistencies all over the place.
Yeah.
But I'm tired of people not saying the quiet part out loud. If you have a big conference slant away from the Big Ten or SEC, just say that. Yeah. It's okay. You can say that out loud and we can hear that. But at the same time, you can't ignore every single conceivable metric to try to rank teams how you want because you like them more, because you like Indiana more, or you like so-and-so more. In the end of the day, we just have to it would be a lot easier, especially with the conversation that has been surrounding the 12-team playoff, which I'll get to in a second. It would be a lot easier if you just said you hated these conferences, mostly the SEC. That's what I'm seeing a whole lot of. People want to down Mizzou, but I agree with you. UNLV and Illinois have a worse case to be in the top 25 than Mizzou does at this current moment. I know Mizzou got blown out by, Alabama and Texas A&M, but at the same time played close with South Carolina, have beaten 4 bowl teams. Like, in the end of the day, they're 7-3 and they're in the SEC. You just have to take these things in stride and move forward. But I got to say something, man, and this is the truth of the matter. And the comeback, of course, will be, well, Georgia has 2 losses. Georgia has 2 losses. I want to take a look at Georgia's resume by the numbers, because they have a legitimate gripe, even though they're sitting at 8-2, to be way higher in the college football playoff poll than they are. First of all, they have the number 1 strength of schedule. Their 2 losses are on the road against 2 teams ahead of them in the college football playoff poll. 2 college football playoff teams at this moment, 2 teams that conceivably could win a national championship. They lost to both of those teams on the road. So, like, when we talk about strength of losses, you have to take that into consideration. Also, when you're looking at Georgia, who's number 10 in this poll, they have the number 2 strength of record. They're number 5 in the FPI. When you go and look at who they have beaten, they have combined as many top 25 wins as number 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. They have as many top 15 wins combined as 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And they have as many top 10 wins combined as 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Their resume is better than the 10th best resume in the country, and they're not ranked as such. And I know people will say there's other teams with less blemishes in the loss record, but those other teams aren't playing Ole Miss, Alabama, Tennessee. They're not playing those teams, much less on the road like they had to do against Texas and Alabama and Ole Miss.
Yeah.
So, like, by every conceivable metric, even though they have 2 losses, they should not be number 10 in the country. Yeah. There's just no real answer to that, in my opinion.
Another point that I really wanted to hammer home is I see a lot of people talking about this isn't the SEC of the old. There is no dominant 2020 Alabama, 2023 Georgia team. And they would be correct. The problem with that is there's 6 or 7 teams that are legitimate 9 win or better teams. And there is no other conference that can match what they have. It doesn't matter if they aren't as good as they have been historically. They're still a league, at least a league better than the next best conference, which is probably the Big Ten.
So the idea of a lot of these people is we're supposed to punish SEC teams for taking losses when their league has gotten deeper. When South Carolina and Mizzou and Ole Miss, Tennessee,
let's add another conference game so we can really get them out of there, so we can try to get them 3 losses and don't have to deal with them anymore.
But they're being punished by a lot of people in the public eye because all of those teams I just mentioned have bridged the gap and have caught up to Alabama and Georgia.
Yeah.
That's not how that should be. We should be praising conferences for getting deeper and having more competition. But that's not how it's going. And also, if you want to go to the out-of-conference thing, we can do that as well.
Yeah.
SEC 48-8 in the out-of-conference this year, or 49-8 with the Mercer game. That's the best by a landslide, quite frankly, of any Power 4 conference. They're also 10-6 or 10-5, I should say, against the Power Four in the out of conference, which is by far landslide best record against Power Four in the out of conference. So, like, in the end of the day, you can sit there and try to look at the loss record and rationalize why SEC teams are supposedly, in your mind, getting biased. They're not. They're dealing with a just absolute week after week punishing competition conference. They're dealing with issues every single week. And Georgia, I think, has had to bear the brunt of the whole thing. That's schedule. Just go look back at it, please. They started the year with Clemson. It's like we forgot about that. Won 34-3 against the number 17 team in the country on a neutral site field, by the way. But just go look from their schedule from game one to where they are now and try and tell me if there's any schedule outside of the SEC that even comes close to matching that level of power and competition. You can't find it. And they have managed it really damn well. If you really pay attention, there's been some weeks that they haven't looked like the Georgia of old. Their offense has been sputtering. I thought they got back on the wagon this week against Tennessee, so we'll get to that in a minute. So there has been moments that they don't look so good. Mm-hmm. But those moments are against the best competition in the country, teams that could win a national title. I cannot sit here and hold that against them like I hold and Notre Dame's not even getting this held against them, an NIU loss that Notre Dame took or, something like that. I can't do that where a lot of people are doing that.
Yeah, it's funny. I think people are just so tired of it. They're doing anything they can. They're grasping at straws to try to rationalize in their brains. But when you look at a situation like Travis Hunter and Ashley Jeanty, which we'll talk about later, they have no problem giving a team like Boise State their credit for playing their schedule. They'll use a team like UNLV to say, this team is really, really good. They'll use a team like Washington State to say, hey, this team is really tough. So if you can have the wherewithal and the discernment to say, you know what, Jeanty's not playing the toughest competition every week, but he's played UNLV. He's played Washington State. They'll play Colorado State in the Mountain West Championship game. Those are respectable teams. How can you then, in turn, look at a team like Alabama, like Georgia, who's played these incredibly tough road games against the Mizzous, the South Carolinas? If you look, and we're not even talking about the top of the top teams we just talked about, but if you look at a team like Tennessee may not fall in that top tier for a lot of people, even though they'll finish 10-2. But that's a damn tough ball game to play in the regular season after you just play Alabama, Clemson, Ole Miss. You're having to come off of those back to back to back. So if you have the discernment to give a guy like Jeanty his credit for playing against the teams that they play against, because he can't control that, how can you then in turn try to discredit a league like the SEC to prop up other teams when you should really be mad? Like, if I'm an Indiana fan, I'm asking, why are we not ranked ahead of Penn State? We're in the same conference. We're undefeated. Why are they not pissed off about that?
Penn State's that guy, like you're sitting with your buddies drinking and you're just flaming each other and throwing a bunch of digs out at each other, and Penn State is over there in the corner being quiet, trying not to laugh because the person's going to say, "Why? I know you're not laughing," and they're going to get ready to go flame them. Penn State's just trying to be quiet and mind their business right now because they are probably the most fraudulently ranked team in the entire college football playoff ranking at this particular moment. Now, even more so than the way these things have turned out, I just can't comprehend or at least understand or enjoy the conversations that are being had about the 12-team playoff. And I want to go to Lane Kiffin because this sort of was quiet. People did not talk about this as much when he said it. But there's been unintended consequences of the 12-team format, of, having no divisions in conferences. But Lane Kiffin last week revealed that some coaches in the SEC don't want to play in the SEC championship due to the college football playoff. They don't want to take a third loss or a second loss, whatever it is. They don't want to take another loss to get them knocked out of the college football playoff altogether. Here's the quote. He said, "I've talked to other coaches. The reward to get a bye in the CFP versus the risk to get knocked out completely, that's a really big risk." And it makes me question, which we did question before, what is the value of conference championship games? Now, I'm not talking about the group of five. Group of five conference championship games are huge. For those programs, you go win a conference championship, you put yourself in the position to potentially get into the college football playoff. Boise State has to go win the Mountain West Championship. Tulane has to win the AAC Championship to put them in a spot to go get into the college football playoff. But when you're talking about the SEC or the Big Ten, the value of the conference championship is completely diminished. And Lane Kiffin is telling you in your face, we don't want to play in it because we're scared that if we take a loss, we could get knocked out. And I will say this, I understand it. I get it. Doesn't mean I have to like it. And also, I think it's pretty cowardly. In the end of the day, you're still going to compete for a conference championship, still going to compete for a championship. I feel like that should be enough. But I, in the end of the day, understand the message he's trying to put out. It does not mean I like it at all, though.
Yeah, and I think this is a conversation that I'd like to have to frame it for the entire conversations, not just the SEC or the championship games. Everybody still has a 4-team mindset. People are acting like only 4 teams can make it, or there has to be 4 elite teams in this field. It's a 12-team playoff. If you look historically, there's been a 3-loss team in the top 10 like the last decade. I don't have the actual number, but I remember listening to it or watching some show, listening to some show, they brought that up. Now, if there's a 3-loss team that hovers around that area, people are going to be crying. Like you just said, Lane is scared to take that 3rd loss because it could potentially kick them out of the playoff. Or it's just a situation where SEC championship would be great. It'd be fantastic. It still means a lot. I know the Alabama kids, Jahad Campbell talked about it today. He was pissed because the kid entered the transfer portal. He's like, look around. He's like, we have national championships and SEC championships on the wall. That still means something around here. So he was saying that it still means something. But why risk a guy getting injured? I will talk about, something that an ESPN analyst said here in a second. But why risk a guy getting injured in the SEC championship game if the ultimate goal is to win a national title game? It's cowardly, like you said. I don't like it, but I understand where Lane is coming from as a coach. I'm putting my team at danger, and I'm putting my potential playoff hopes in danger, taking another loss, even if it's just psychologically. What if Ole Miss gets a repeat against Georgia in the SEC championship game? That's not going to happen because of the tiebreakers and all that good stuff. But let's say they did, and then Georgia kicks their ass, gets revenge on them the week before they have to go in the playoff game. That psychologically, like, there is very little benefit outside of winning that game and winning it dominantly. So I understand what Lane's saying. I hate it. I hate the state of the college football world we're in now, but I feel them where it's coming from.
Yep. Now let's get to that ESPN analyst. And honestly, I use that term loosely, even though it is his title. But Joey Galloway, what the fuck was he talking about? Everybody's heard it at this point. Joey Galloway went on the college football playoff ranking show, and they were talking through this whole thing. And then they ended up getting on Indiana and Ohio State, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But he had the nerve to say Indiana's number 5 in the country. Like, if they sort of stay around that spot, play a close game with Ohio State, sure, they can get in. But he made the suggestion that Indiana sit out their starting quarterback, Curtis Rourke, to make sure that it doesn't get held against him or he doesn't get injured. And they can always lean on the fact that Curtis Rourke wasn't playing if they get blown out, and they'd still have a case for it. That's cowardly, yes. It's also one of the dumbest sports takes I have heard in my entire life. I don't know if there's really, in the past decade, a close second. This is as bad as it gets. You're talking about a team that is 10-0 for probably the first time in program history, unless there's something I don't know about dating back to the 20s and the 30s. But this is the biggest game of their football program's history. And you're suggesting, in the name of a 12-team playoff, to be one of those representatives, you're suggesting that their starting quarterback sit down. What the hell was that, man? Like, I'm glad that you had Greg McElroy and Booger all on the set just eviscerating him. Like, Joey, shut the hell up. That's ridiculous. But something tells me he probably had a conversation with someone earlier that day that probably shares that sentiment with him, or he wouldn't have brought it to the show. You know this. Like, we run things by each other before we bring it up on the show. And you give it the yay or the nay. He probably had someone tell him that was an okay idea. So maybe this is a shared sentiment by certain people at ESPN. But that was the epitome of the problem I have with the discussion around this expanded playoff. You're trying to find ways in, and you're not just playing football in the games ahead of you. Yep. It's ridiculous.
I mean, I think he's an idiot. I don't think he's an idiot. I think it was an idiotic statement. But it's something that we see at the NFL level. Even if you're a wild card team, you don't even have to win the division. If you know ahead of week 16 that you clinched the wild card game, what do they do a lot of time? Sit their quarterback. They sit their star players and sit them out, even if it is an important game. So I think it's just a bad precedent to set because we've opened the door for this type of shit to be in the conversation.
Yeah.
A year ago, it would say what you will about the 14 playoffs, say what you will about the BCS. A year
Not
ago,
perfect at all.
That would never have even been a thought. Nobody could fathom sitting out for a game like this. This year, I won't say names, but there was a national
We have people
analyst
saying they don't want to be in a conference championship, and
Yep.
we have people saying sit your quarterback.
Yep. I mean, we have national analysts
It's gross.
writing SEC hit pieces in defense of Indiana, basically covering our ass because they think they're going to lose this game to Ohio State regardless. So they're writing hit pieces saying that 11-1 team should be in regardless. Kind of just giving them a win after this week anyway, even though they're not guaranteed to win that game. But they're kind of trying to cover their ass. They're going to hype Indiana up and say they're the best team since sliced bread. Look at what Kurt Cignetti's doing. If they win the game, great. Ohio State has another quality loss. Can't keep Ohio State out of 10-2 because you want the SECs in. And if they lose the game, then they're going to be like, well, they lost to Ohio State. It was a great run. They've done so well. They're going to finish probably 11-1, and we'll still get to keep them in. So that's when you get a stupid take like Joey Galloway saying something like that, because they're playing with house money. If they lose this game, so what? So why would I risk my guy getting hurt out there, even if it is the biggest game in school history, because we got money to make in a couple of weeks in the playoff game?
I get it. I just hate the cowardice that's creeping in.
100%.
Shit pisses
100%.
me off more than anything.
Yeah,
I'm a
they
ball
open
player,
the door
brother.
for this type of stuff.
I'm here for competition. Go compete. Like I am annoyed by all of this cowardly activity and these cowardly conversations from the people that should know better. Joey Galloway knows a lot better than that, brother. Levels. He played at the highest levels in college. He should know better than to be anti-competition like that. It's frustrating. It's very frustrating.
Cignetti would probably spit on you if you suggested.
Oh, Kurt Cignetti would lose his fucking mind. Kurt Cignetti probably lost his mind when he was watching. I'm sure he was watching too, but that was insane. Now, I want to get to this. The buys right now are being projected as Boise State at number 4, Miami from the ACC at number 3, Texas in the SEC at number 2, even though I don't know if they're going to win the SEC championship, but if all favorites win, it would be Alabama and Texas. It would be a really fun game. And then number 1 is Oregon from the Big Ten. Of course, Boise State from the Mountain West at number 4. There's one major conference that's left out of those buys, which is something we didn't quite expect. That would be the Big 12. BYU ends up losing to Kansas, who's a very capable team, who's going to be playing Colorado this week. We'll see what happens there, but I guess I'm just going to frame it this way. What the hell is going to happen in the Big 12? Who's going to win it? And ultimately, who is going to be in the college football playoff? Who's going to lift themselves up high enough as the season ends?
The best case scenario for the Big 12 would be to get BYU and Colorado to win out and have those two teams play in the Big 12 championship game. I think those have proven themselves over the course of the season to be the best two teams in the conference, despite the close loss against Kansas State, which Travis Hunter went out of that game in the third quarter. Colorado had that, and then this past weekend, Kansas beat BYU, even though Kansas is starting to get back to health, and they're looking a lot more like the team that we thought they would at the beginning of the season, with Jalen Daniels and those guys, and Lance Leipold has those guys playing some pretty good football right now. So Colorado has to be on their P's and Q's this weekend, even though I think they'll be able. I don't think Kansas has faced the offense as explosive as Colorado's, and they're figured to be getting Jimmy Horn Jr. back this week, so that'll be another big addition for Colorado. But I think if Colorado and BYU went out, that is the best case scenario, because one, they'll have the best records, right? And then Colorado has the brand recognition. So BYU, if they went out, could finish as high as 12-1, and Colorado could finish as high as 11-2. Plus, with Colorado's brand recognition, there's no way they would leave those guys out of the playoffs. And I think they would get a lot higher seed and more respect.
See, that's my question. Do you think if Boise State wins out, right? Let's use that example. I think it would be better, honestly, if Colorado State lost the game and UNLV hopped into the Mountain West Championship as a ranked team. That would really help out Boise State if they got another win against UNLV as a ranked team. But let's say Boise State wins out. You have the winner of the conference and the Big 12 being BYU, and they win out and only have one loss. Will they then hop Boise State if Boise State wins out? Because Boise State's 12th right now. They have the bye. Can BYU backdoor their way into a first-round bye if they win out? That's the question I have right now. I'm very curious about that. And obviously there's some things we're going to have to see actually figure themselves out, like who's going to be in the Mountain West title game. If it's UNLV, I think it could really bolster Boise State's sort of resume. If it's Colorado State, then we have to sort of look at it twice and sort of decide what we think. But Do you think a team from the Big 12, probably BYU with the one loss, can hop over Boise State if Boise State continues to handle business?
Well, that's a great question. And the answer is yes, I think they could. But the bigger question I have, maybe a little bit, getting lost in the fray here. Let's say Army beats Notre Dame.
Ooh,
and Army's
that's
in
a
there
good one.
undefeated. And then they'll be able to have another resume booster win against Navy, who's probably going to finish 8-4 at worst. You're telling me a 12-0, maybe 13-0 Army with a Notre Dame win and a Navy win wouldn't be worthy of that bye over those teams that we just mentioned?
No, I agree with you. I'm with you. I know what's fucking crazy though. We had Emory Hunt on earlier this year, a few weeks ago, and he said some shit that just like threw us for a loop. He said, "Oh, I think it's conceivable 2 or 3 teams from the group of 5 this year could actually get in the playoff." And he actually explained it. He brought up Army, brought up Navy, Tulane. I think he brought up in that conversation. Memphis, even though we'll get to that later, they're not going to be there. But if Army handles business against Notre Dame, that throws the biggest loop to the committee that they've ever had, even through the 14 playoff, 12-team play. Doesn't matter. They're going to be confused as hell about what to do with that. And we looked at Emory crazy when he said that, and we pushed back. But it could be a year. It could be in the year 1 of the 12-team playoff. I know it's a far-out possibility because, hell, Army's a 14.5-point dog on the road in South Bend. I don't think they're going to win that game. But if they do, it could get real spooky, man. It could get crazy.
Yeah, I'm excited for that game because it's going to tell us a lot about both teams. I think Notre Dame's been a little bit more battle-tested. We've seen it, but this Army team, man, I believe in these guys. I don't know I'm not saying I'm going to pick them to win, like you said, but I think it's going to be closer than a 14-point ball game. And if
tough as hell. They're tough as nails, man.
Yeah, and if it is a decisive, impressive win for Notre Dame, that to me is a feather in their cap. Because if I'm going to give them their credit and say that Army is a team that I think could potentially make the playoff and that can give them hell, if they are able to handle business and look good against them, to me that is a nice feather in their cap. It still wouldn't have them, in my top 6 or 7, but it will still be impressive and kind of solidify their position. But man, the Big 12, I think the best case scenario for them, just kind of wrapping that up, BYU, Colorado, you want them to win out because those have been the best 2 teams. And I think the most important thing beyond revenue, beyond everything else, you want your best teams to represent you in the playoffs.
Right.
And to have the best chance to win. Because the best chance to win means more money. You're going to make more money from 2 games or 3 games than you will from 1 game, no matter how much popular one more team is than the other. If you have a team that has a legitimate chance to go far in the playoffs, that's the team you need to be trying to get in there. So I think that would be the best case scenario for the Big 12.
This is interesting, though, because if both those teams win, go to the Big 12 championship. If BYU wins, they should probably get a bye. I think that they would lift themselves up to go get a bye, and you're solidified in there. But if Colorado takes that 3rd loss in that championship game, they're probably not in the college football playoff at all. They're going to be on the outside looking in. If Colorado beats BYU, you could have the opportunity to get 2 in, but I still think that would be an uphill battle because you're battling against a college football playoff committee that's probably not going to give you a whole bunch of credit. So this is going to be interesting. Big 12's in a weird spot. And really it goes back to, all of the teams we thought would be here not being here. Oklahoma State, Kansas, Utah, all of them are just no shows this year. Now, let's go ahead and get to winners and losers of the week. I'm going to start with my winner. My winner, the Tulane Green Wave, brother. Shout out to the Green Wave. And what I have to say is, as a alum of Memphis, you got to be a little jealous, man. You got to look over there and say, that should be us. 3 straight AAC title games. They're going to be playing Army in the AAC title game. They won a New Year's 6 bowl game against USC a couple of years back. They just had a coaching switch from Willie Fritz to John Summerall. Didn't skip a beat. Maybe have even gotten better. You have a quarterback in Darian Mensah, who's a freshman. Running back who's run for 1,200 yards, and Mekhi Hughes is a sophomore. 5 of your top 6 tacklers on the defensive side of the ball have more years to play.
Yeah.
I mean, when we talk about programs who have lifted their viability in the grand scheme of college football, put themselves in a spot to be picked up by a bigger conference, put themselves in a spot to always be in the national picture, Tulane has done that better than anybody has the past 3 years. And this seems like just the start for them. They have a lot of young players and a lot of guys that can come back next year and continue rolling this thing. So I'm just impressed with Tulane. And obviously, of course, I'm responding to this, bringing up Tulane because they did beat Navy 35-0. beat the ever-living hell out of them where no one else has been able to do that besides Notre Dame. So shout out to Tulane, as much as it pains me to say as a Memphis alum.
Yeah, shout out to them. And we'll get, I said, my guy, General Manager Cole Hurd, we're going to get him on the show very soon. But I talk to him quite often, man. He's hellacious, bro. He's already 2 years in the future looking at recruiting classes. And, he's a guy that I think as long as he's there, man, they're going to keep the talent coming in. So shout out to Tulane. My winner of the week is pretty simple. I won't spend a lot of time on it. Carson Beck. Simply put, he needed that. Georgia needed that. I've been saying it for the last 3 or 4 weeks. If they can get Beck to just play turnover-free football again, they're going to be as good as anybody in the country. They're going to be as tough to beat as any team in the country. He doesn't have to be Superman. You just have to make enough throws. Get the ball out on time. Georgia leads the country in drops, so they haven't been the most reliable for him either. But get the ball out on time. Don't force the ball. Make throws when you have to. I thought he was really good in the red zone, and that was a great step that he took forward because they've been getting in the field goal range a lot. Into the red zone a lot, and had been converting a ton of those. So he did a great job there. And Georgia needed it because as long as he's not turning over the ball, that defense is still as good as anybody in the country. And they're young. They're going to get better. They're playing a ton of guys. The future is looking bright. I mean, we already know they're going to recruit well and going to be good for the future, but the future is looking bright for Georgia because they're playing a ton of young guys this year. So happy for Carson Beck. I thought he needed to get the monkey off his back a little bit, and he did it against a team that had given up 20 points all season, put up 31 on those guys. So hell of a game from Carson Beck.
Yeah, and shout out to Mike Bobo as well. I mean, the guy reached into the bag finally because he knew his job was on the line this week. Let's be honest. They don't throw up 31 points and win that game. Mike Bobo could have been fired before this whole thing started, but he finally remembered he had tight ends, by the way. He finally remembered they probably have the deepest and best tight end room in the country. Yep. Oscar Dell, Ben Urasek, Lawson Lucky, those guys combined for 10 catches. 10 of the 25 completions that Carson Beck had. And Oscar Delp was both of the passing touchdowns. That's something I've been waiting for all year. And they finally decided to do it in week 12. Okay, better late than never, I guess. My loser again, he was my loser last week. Brian freaking Kelly. LSU loses to Florida, and I think Florida's a tough team. And I'm impressed with Billy Napier and certainly with DJ Lagway. The guy can uncork a deep ball, can use his legs. But LSU's not a tough team. They're not disciplined.
Yep. They
don't play with any type of vigor. They weren't ready to go in that game. I mean, what else do I have to give you? Right? You're 6-3. You're still ranked. People still think highly of you. You go on the road in the swamp and you lay an egg like that. You look like a team that just has nothing to play for. That's on Brian Kelly, man. As much as it's on the players having a certain mindset, Brian Kelly has to have them thinking a certain way, acting a certain way, kicking your ass a certain way. And he's not doing that. They're not tough in the trenches. They are not disciplined. They don't have a good defense. Nothing about that team is morphing to the identity that Brian Kelly had at Notre Dame, which he thought he was going to be able to take over here. I mean, when you look also like the O-line, I just don't understand it. I guess their interior sucks, Kai. Maybe that's what it is. But you have Will Campbell on one side, Emory Jones, guys that are going to be high draft picks in the 2025 NFL draft, and you give up 7 sacks on Garrett Nussmeier?
Yeah.
It's just that team is in a rough spot. And I look at
the year.
And I look at Brian Kelly too. And if you're LSU, you want better results now. Like there are people already in LSU circles calling for him to be fired. But what the hell are you going to do to fire him? If you fired him right now, you owe him $60 million. You fire him next November, you owe him $51 million. You fire him 3 Novembers from now, you owe him $41 million.
Yep.
So you can't fire him coming up soon. And here's the ironic part of the whole thing. Scott Woodward, their AD who came from Texas A&M. You know the last big coaching hire he had before Brian Kelly and this big contract was? Jimbo Fisher.
Yeah.
This feels almost identical to the way the Jimbo Fisher era went at A&M, where you bring in this big coach. Oh, he's going to get us over the hump, at least 10 wins a year. And you just see it completely fade and flail. It feels so similar. And Scott Woodward was responsible for both those hires.
Yeah. The thing I love about it is seeing the Brian Kelly cam, the memes that he gives us after a bad play or a poor play. You always hear about coaches saying you have to be, reluctant to be emotional. You have to be reluctant to be in the moment, right? He's a guy that shows all his emotions on his sleeve. There's a clip going viral where he's screaming at a kid saying, "You're not coachable. Who the F do you think you are?" There's a clip where he's yelling at a coach and screaming at a coach after a third down conversion. It's just like, it's always everybody else's fault but Brian Kelly. So that's one thing I don't like. He just talks down to everybody on the sideline. And I'm not actually in the rooms. I don't know how bad it is, but I've never heard anybody come out and say anything good in support of Brian Kelly. And I think that says a lot.
When you see your leading receiver and NFL draft pick Kyron Lacey coming off the sideline, just basically motherfucking going after Brian Kelly. That's
the third quarter before he got a target. Like, that's
not a good sign.
Yeah, but my loser, and this is just like, I'm being more facetious than anything, right? Like, I don't actually think he's a loser, but I'm talking about the general discourse. I think that because it's one thing when it's just trolls, right? Trolls online, or you read a blog or some guy from the opposing team that's trying to take a dump on the kid. But when you start seeing national analysts and people that have Heisman votes, AP votes, people that probably have some type of influence or aligned to somebody that may be on the college football playoff committee or know somebody who has a Heisman vote. When you start seeing stuff coming from those people, that's when it gets a bit concerning for me. Travis Hunter had 5 receptions for 55 yards, including a tremendous catch at the end of the first half when it was still a one-possession game. Nuts catch, right? That put them in range on a 4th down, by the way. If he doesn't catch that ball to make that play, who did they play this past week? I'm trying to blank.
Utah
gets the ball back, and they're going to have good field position with a chance to go score before half. So he makes a game-turning play. Like, that play turned the momentum on his head. Goes down, gets an interception. People are trying to say, "Oh, he didn't do anything on that play." Bullshit, he didn't. You guys don't know what you're talking about. He's playing zone. He's sagging off of his man. And instead of watching the ball, being a watcher, not finishing through the play, not showing any wherewithal, he sprints his ass down the field. Watch the clip from the beginning. He sprints his ass down the field. Nick Saban talks about it all the time, creating your own good luck. Good things come to those who hustle. Good things come to those that are prepared. He sprints his ass down the field, and he was there to be the interceptor when the ball was kicked. If he doesn't hustle his ass down the field, he never gets there. That's instincts, man. That is hustle. That is football 101. That's some shit that when you're in the training room and the meeting room, the coach is rewinding that 10 times to show people this is the discipline, this is the effort that we're supposed to play with, this is the standard. You can give the kid the credit that had the pass breakup too. He had a fantastic play, made a great play in the pocket, and it wasn't a great throw, but he made a great play in the pocket, tipped the ball up. Travis Hunter was there to get a pick. That is a hell of a play. He had 3 tackles as well, and he had a rushing touchdown. And people don't give me this garbage time shit. Like, I watched Lane Kiffin let Jackson Dart throw the ball when he has 4 touchdowns and 400 yards to get it up to 450 and 6 touchdowns. I watched Jinty score 1 million 4-quarter touchdowns when they're up by 2 possessions. I would never say Jinty's having garbage time touchdowns. Like, cut this stuff out, man.
Yeah,
people are trying to discredit what Travis is doing for I can't figure it out.
Well, I'll tell you what. You can try to discredit him all you want, but he just comes out every week and does the same shit. So you have to keep trying to discredit him because he's still performing at the highest levels. And for those people that want to sort of doubt and downplay everything Travis Hunter does, after this week and that performance that you weren't all that impressed with, his Vegas odds went from plus 120 to minus 400 to win the Heisman. So he must have done something right. That's my suspicion.
Another thing, he was named a semifinalist for the Thorpe Award and the Biletnikoff. So I hate this jack of all trades, master of none bullshit. No, he's arguably the best cornerback in the country.
He's top 10, or they have 11 finalists for both the awards. I know they have 11.
I believe they have 11 finalists.
So that means he's top 11 at both.
At worst, he's top 11 at both. I'm going to pull up his receiving stats real quick and think about who he shares the load with, right? He's out there with LaJohntay Wester, who's probably going to be a third-team All-American, all-conference type of guy. Will Shepard, who's going to be an NFL draft pick. Jimmy Horn Jr. Shadur takes off and runs a little bit. So he's not getting 1 million targets a game. He's efficient with what he does out there.
All you have to say to people when it comes to that is one of the best, probably it's a top 5 passing offense in the country. He's the leading wide receiver in that passing offense.
74 receptions.
You shouldn't even have to have these like qualifiers for the guy.
Bro,
just watch the fucking game. Use your eyes.
It's ridiculous. 74 yards, 74 catches, 911 yards, 9 touchdowns, and a rushing touchdown, and he's essentially missed 2 ball games because he didn't play this. He didn't play like 3/4 of the Arizona game. He didn't play the whole second half of the Kansas State game. They got their ass kicked against Nebraska, so he kind of came out of that game early. He ain't really played a full season, and he's putting up these numbers. He's going to finish with close to 100 catches, over 1,000 yards, 10+ touchdowns. And people want to bring up tackles on defense for a cornerback. What are we doing here?
I love what Deion said. He goes, if you have a bunch of tackles as a corner, that's not a good sign.
No. That means somebody's catching the ball on you. You having to go make a ton of plays because you can't cover him. He has 8 pass breakups, 3 interceptions, forced fumble. Like, he has made plenty of plays. And the plays that don't show up are the plays where he's blowing up the play on a screen play.
Kai, this is the type of visceral response we don't even need anymore. Like, if you're on Colorado side, Coach Prime side, just don't even worry about these idiots anymore.
Silly, man.
Like, because they're obviously just being complete haters at this point. They know it. The less attention you give to them, the less breath you give to them, the better. They'll go away because they'll realize how stupid they're being. But hey, it's going to continue to happen. We'll just have to live with it. We'll move on.
See you in New York, man.
Yeah, for sure. He'll be giving you a trophy presentation. He'll be speaking on behalf of himself with the Heisman Trophy in front of him, not too long. But let's go ahead and talk some Senior Bowl. We're going to bring on the executive director of the Reese Senior Bowl, Jim Nagy.
You played with Jacob Ravier with the hustle and on the grease.
Yeah, hold on. Yeah, we don't do no Jake hate on this side. That's my dog. I'll be on Twitter, bro. I don't know what I'll be on Twitter seeing everybody hating on Jake. That's my dog.
You ain't never seen me doing that, who?
I'm just making sure. That's my dog, bro. I gotta get off the Grizz Twitter. I don't know why I see it all the time. But I saw like somebody say that he's played well when he's had opportunity. You know what I'm saying? Consistently.
Yeah.
Like, for me, like when I saw Jake my rookie year, he played well when he was with the hustle. You know what I'm saying? Obviously, it's a little different. But he can go. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's always been able to go. He's just kind of had unfortunate situations where he got hurt, where he was sick, where he just random things that pop up that has kind of hindered him from playing. And on top of GG and Vince being really good. Now he's getting consistent run, which I said, like, the 11-man is strange, but it's helping him out. You know what I'm saying? It's helping Santi out. Like, it's helping guys out. Pip's playing well. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's good for those guys. They get to do more. This new offense that they've been running has been good for guys to just make plays. You know what I mean?
Tune in to the Anthony Sane Show Wednesdays and Fridays at 12 p.m. weekly on the Bluff City Media YouTube channel.
How do you feel? How should we feel at this point in the season? Memphis sitting at 9-2 with really no mathematical chance of AAC championship.
How do I feel about 9-2? Okay, not great.
Yeah,
not even really good. In a conference like that, where you clearly have bad enough product to have 6 different coaches being fired and them looking for new leadership, you should be at the top of that conference, first or second every single year. To not have shown up at an AAC championship since 2019, since the Cotton Bowl year, it's frustrating. I feel okay about 9-2, but I don't feel good by any stretch of the imagination. It should be better. I know how hard it is to win college football games. Like, I completely... Back rolling right here on G5 Classified, and joining us now is the executive director of the Reese Senior Bowl. That would be Jim Nagy. Jim, how's it going, man? Thanks for carving out some time.
Yeah, guys, thanks for having me on.
Yes, sir. So how's it going? I saw about 6 days ago is when you started to really get the invites and all the basically out and accepted. I mean, how many guys have accepted invites at this moment, and how many more guys do you have on your radar?
There was all the invites arrived early last week on the campuses. And they started rolling in. So I don't know, we're somewhere in that 25-30 range right now, just trying to figure out which schools have actually handed out the invites and which coaches are still sitting on them. I mean, that's always been kind of the Senior Bowl's protocol, is sending the invites to the coaches and letting those guys decide when they want to do it. Every coach has, different timing. If they're I was talking to John Summerall last week, and he was holding on to one of we invited one of the Tulane players, and he wanted to get through that Navy game this weekend. He was going to give that out today. So, it's kind of where we're at.
Yeah, Coach. Can you talk about your decision to kind of, well, I know it's bigger than just one person, but to keep the game in Mobile? I'm from Fairhope, Alabama. I grew up going to the game. So keeping it in Mobile was a huge deal for me and a lot of people in that area. Can you kind of talk about what went into the decision to keep the game there?
There wasn't really a decision. We were approached by the National Football League to move the game to Orlando to replace the Pro Bowl back 7 years ago when I took the job. And this game means too much to our community. I told them that day. I mean, not only just the tradition of the game being here, but the economic impact it has on community. I mean, the game brings in almost $50 million in a week. And when you're in a city this size, I mean, that would be a tremendous burden, tremendous loss if the Mobile community lost that money. So in addition, all the things we do year round in the Mobile market with youth football and high school football and everything we do to give back. We never considered leaving. That was never a consideration. But that's where the draft starts in Mobile started. We just really tried to tie the game to the city and make it synonymous. And that's what was really cool last year, watching the first round of the draft and having 10 first rounders go, and having the guys on all the different networks saying Mobile sometimes more than they were saying Senior Bowl. So this community means everything to us.
Now, holler at me about getting this gig 7 years ago. You had an 18-year career as a scout in the NFL, capped off by 5 really good years with the Seahawks, where you guys brought in a lot of good talent. Super Bowl was mixed in there somewhere. Holler at me about the transition, the career transition, and why it was made, and why this is your main gig at this particular moment.
Yeah, it was really a family decision. We've been living in Mobile since 2007. It's my wife's hometown. And this job came up, and my son was in 8th grade at the time, getting ready to play high school sports, football, basketball. And my daughter was like in 4th or 5th grade, and now she's in high school. So it was just an opportunity to kind of still do what I love to do. And that's evaluate talent. And certainly in this role, I mean, I've grown. There's a lot more on my plate now than there was when I was scouting. Just got to grow a little bit personally, but no, it was all about the family and being around for my son. When you're scouting in the league, you're on the road 200 nights a year. So it's not a real family friendly profession. So that's all it was about.
Can you kind of talk to me about what makes the Senior Bowl have such staying power? We've seen a lot of all-star games come and go. We've also seen, the East-West Shrine Bowl has been pretty good, and they've elevated their level. But Mobile, the Senior Bowl, the Reese's brand, NFL Network seems to be the standard still. Can you talk about what kind of goes into that, keeping that level of excellence and being the premier postseason showcase game for college guys?
Well, it's always been the best game. I think we've done a lot of good things in the space over the last 7 years. I mean, when I jumped on social media, there was a lot of snarky people out there saying, Nagy, nobody cares about your little game. And like you said, rising tides raise all ships. I mean, I feel like we've helped out the Shrine Bowl, and again, the league putting some resources behind the Shrine Bowl wiped out the NFLPA game. So that's helped lift the Shrine Bowl as well. But, the numbers are the numbers. We've got 195 first round picks since the year 2000, and all the other all-star games combined have 2. So, the game's always been the best game. This is the game that always had the NFL coaches. And to me, it's about our community. What makes this game better is the community aspect of it. These kids get treated unbelievably well. We've had the same staff in place. Some of these same people, we call them our Senior Bowl family. They've been around the game for 30 years. So operationally, nobody functions at the level we do. It's impossible when you're moving games around all the time and you don't have the full-time support staff. We've got 300 volunteer committee members that love this game and want to treat these players well when they come to Mobile and have the players have a great experience. So to me, and then it's just the buy-in of the NFL. I mean, the 32 clubs. I mean, they love coming to Mobile. It's always been the best platform to evaluate players. And the cool part is the social media has really helped us. Has helped our rosters connect with these players. I think that's the biggest piece of advice I got when I took the job. from a couple friends in the agent community was like, man, you need to wrestle the power away from us. Right now, we hold too much power in this thing, telling these kids whether or not to play in these games or not. So, I think using social media, getting these players excited about coming to Mobile. So when they get the invite, like they're not thinking twice about accepting or not. So, again, we're coming off 4 straight years with over 100 players drafted. That when we got here, the Senior Bowl, we were like in the 70s. It was like 74, 76, 78 players drafted. Last year, we had 110 guys drafted. So I just think there's been more and more buy-in from the players. And then it's just relationships, man. It's relationships with all the college coaches and guys in the NFL. And so we're very grateful for them too. Because the NFL guys, when they talk to agents, they tell them they want to see the players here in Mobile. So it all works hand in hand, but it comes down to relationships.
It's funny you say that because it's the only time of the year I have to wait maybe a day to get a table at Dumbwaiter, or there's a 20-minute line at Haberdashery to get a drink. But it's funny because everybody loves that. I like the environment because you'll see a guy that's a 21-year-old blogger just graduated and he's getting a drink next to NFL GM. It's a different environment down there for sure. So it's one of my favorite stops of the year to come back home and kind of be around that atmosphere.
Yeah, no, it's cool. I mean, the whole NFL community descends on the town, and it's still a small town feel. It's not like I love the Combine. I've been going to the Combine forever and love going up there. Jeff Foster does a great job with that event. But it feels more corporate. Indy's certainly a much bigger city than Mobile. But when you're here, you kind of run into everybody. I tell people you could put a lawn chair out in front of our offices here on Dolphin Street, and you would see every GM and head coach at some point in the week pass by. So no, it is unique. It has a really unique feel to it.
Now, you guys evaluate all types of talent from Power 4. You go Group of 5 down. I mean, your first invite that was accepted this year, I believe, was a William and Mary offensive tackle. But we're a Group of 5 podcast, so holler at me about how you guys go about sort of evaluating players when the competition's not quite what it is at the Power 4 level. We know the SEC and the Big Ten definitely lend themselves to being able to evaluate and translate all of what they're doing on the field to NFL football. Not so much Group of 5 and lower. How do you go about evaluating those types of players?
Well, we start off just looking at the 2D depth charts in the offseason and get our eyeballs on all those guys at the FBS level. I'm sure there's a drop-off from Power 4 to Group of 5, but that's still really good football, we pride ourselves at all levels. We've had a couple Division III guys in the game since we got here 7 years ago, and one of them, Quinn Miners, is one of the best guards in the league right now. So, you just got to adjust your eye a little bit. Again, you're just looking for the physical traits of a player and kind of, the ceiling athletically and potential. I guess the best way to say it is just the physical potential of a player. And then you watch instincts, and those things don't change. Instincts don't change, regardless of what level. Instincts, effort, competitiveness, physicality, those things don't change. So, and that's the transfer portal has frankly hurt all the lower levels, including the Group of 5. You're seeing, FCS guys jumping up to Group of 5, but then the Group of 5 guys jumping up to the Power 4. So we're in a little bit of a different time. The last couple of years, there's been a ton of change in college football, and not necessarily all for the good, in my opinion. You see these Group of 5 programs that do a really good job of developing their players, and then they get them to a point, their junior, senior year, to really take advantage of that development, and then next thing you know, they're off to chasing Power 4 money. So you just, again, it's the evaluation from Group of 5 to Power 4 isn't very hard. Where it gets hard is, you get down to the D2 and D3 levels. That's challenging.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite parts of the week, going down there, is watching those, lower level, smaller school guys get to go up against the big guys, because, Quinyon Mitchell, I think a lot of people knew who he was coming into Mobile last year, but he dominated. But the year before, I was really excited to see Carl Brooks. He's the guy that caught my eye when I was watching Bowling Green and those guys play, and he got down there and he dominated the week down there in practice. So I was really excited to see that. Cody Mount, an FCS guy from North Dakota State, held up very well, played all 5 spots over the offensive line. So I think that's one of my favorite parts, is getting to see those guys, because most of the time, if they're good enough to catch your eye on that tape, they're good enough to be in that atmosphere, in that environment, and compete with those guys as well.
Yeah, it's picking the right ones. It's one thing just to have small school helmets in the game for the sake of it, but that's not what it's about. It's about bringing the best guys. And like when I was at William and Mary talking to Charles Grant off on the side after we did the invite, I told him, like, there's nobody down here you won't be able to block. Just like come in here with confidence. That's probably the biggest change, or biggest difference, I should say, between coming down here as a scout for 20 some years and then, being in the position I'm in now is I've been a little more in tune to the anxiety, for the players behind the week. And it's not just, and I told Charles this, it's not just the small school guys. I mean, trust me, the Alabama guys, the Georgia guys, I mean, they all feel it too. This is the best of the best. And they know it's a big week and there's a lot on these guys, between the interview process and learning a playbook, going on the field and, competing and in front of key decision makers. I mean, you look over and there's Mike Tomlin or there's, John Schneider. I mean, these guys that are going to be making the picks in April, that can be nerve wracking. So, it's about bringing the right ones. And I feel like we've done that over the last 6-7 years.
Yeah, now something I've always wondered about you bring in all these guys for the Senior Bowl. Some of them have really good weekends or weeks, and then they get drafted. And then sometimes you'll see their development not go the way that you thought it would go, or they get dropped into a bad situation. Does that frustrate you sort of watching that? And also, I do want to just sort of dig into this, but it comes to the quarterback position. How do you feel about the way that it's developed in the NFL, or maybe the lack of time they give for a quarterback to develop? We've seen Caleb Williams have some struggles. Anthony Richardson's a guy who's gotten sat down. So what do you think about all that?
Yeah, first part of the question, we love following our guys, and you love when they get in a situation where you feel like they're set up for success. I mean, it's not going to happen everywhere. You want to have guys make the most of their opportunities. And so you can't control it. We're always happy for the guys that go on and have good NFL careers, certainly. And then with the quarterback thing, we're just we're not seeing a lot of patience at the position. We're seeing a lack of development. I think it just stems from our culture right now in society. And we're in this must prove it now kind of short leash, microwave, whatever you want to call it, whatever term you want to call it. I mean, I think we all know what I'm talking about. And it's to the detriment of the player. The two most recent examples where guys have been able to sit and learn a little bit are Jordan Love and Pat Mahomes, and those both worked out great. So hopefully more teams will be doing that, even with the Patriots this year. Even though Drake May only sat for 4, 5, 6 weeks, whatever, at least he was able to get into a season and watch Jacoby Brissett play a little bit. And now Drake's been having some success here. So, I think the league is going to have to resist the urge, whether it's the ownership group or the fan bases. I mean, that's where these coaches feel the pressure from. And hopefully these coaches, can resist the temptation and sit some of these guys down a little bit. But you hit it on the head. Some of these guys just aren't landing in great situations where they're set up for a lot of success early on. Or they're not ready for it.
Can you kind of talk about what goes into your offensive line scouting? Because, we're both offensive linemen. We both play G5 FCS football. So it's cool to see a guy like McClendon Curtis. His offensive line coach, Kevin Revis, coached me at Jacksonville State. He had been raving to me about this kid for years. So it's cool to see a guy like him get a shot. I remember a couple years ago, you invited a kid like BJ Autry from Jacksonville State. What goes into that offensive line scouting? How deep into the trenches are you guys getting? Are you sending a bunch of people out? Are you going off recommendations? Or are you just, randomly coming across these guys? What's that process like for the trenches?
No, I mean, that's why we built what we have. That's why we built this thing the way we built it. When I got here, they didn't have tape in the office. So, again, that sounds crazy. In hindsight, when I called the league office and, told them who I was and how do we get the tape? And they're like, Jim, we've never given All-Star Games tape before. I like, well, how do you want me to do our job? How do you want me to do the job then? Right. I mean, because again, I'm getting hit up. If I told you that the amount of calls I've gotten in the last 3 days from head coaches, family members, you got to do the work. If you give people a reason why their player isn't getting invited, that's one thing. But if we weren't doing the work, I mean, we've got 11 former NFL scouts on our staff to bring credibility to this thing. They're guys I trust. They're guys I've been on the road with. So we're doing it the best way we can do it, and then we obviously include the NFL in our process as well with the calls we make around the league. And those are exhaustive phone calls. We had 14 3-hour phone calls sharing notes. And I like I told the guys upstairs, like, you guys got to understand, like, the NFL is the most secretive place in the world and most paranoid place in the world. And we just had 14 teams completely open up their draft boards to us, where they were like sharing specific grades on players like that. So to my point to them was that doesn't just happen, like that's a lot of years of relationship building where you've got trust, where they're open with you, knowing it's not going to leave the office here in Mobile, Alabama. So, yeah, we don't take recommendations. Yeah, if coaches want to call us and talk about how much they love a guy and talk about his character and his makeup and why they think he's going to make it, great. We'd love to listen to that. But again, if every college coach was, going to bat for his guy, we would never be able to put this thing together. So I'm just glad we do it the way we do it. I believe in our process. We've kind of tweaked it every year. After 6-7 years now, I feel like we're in the right spot in terms of getting this thing right. So, but with the offensive lineman, man, it's the same as all the positions. You're just trying to look for the best players and bring the best players possible. That's it. Simple as that.
Do you remember number 71, Gabe Kuhn, being on a short list at any point in 2017, 2018, that type of time, something like that? Maybe.
I don't know.
Heard of the guy? I don't know. You ever heard of him? That name ever cross your face? I ended up at the NFLPA Collegiate Bowl. That's where I ended up after my senior season.
I never went to the NFLPA game. It's too bad it's not here anymore. Dane Vandernat did a great job of that game. It's really a shame that it's still not around. I think Dane did a really good job running that game. I heard nothing but good things from guys in the NFL. And again, these platforms, I feel like we've got the best game here, but again, they're all advantageous. Like I just went down and spoke to a team ranked in the top 10 last week, and spoke to all their draft eligible guys. And again, I told you, Senior Bowl is one thing. We'd love to get a couple of you guys in the game. But if you get invited to another game, go do it. They're all great opportunities, as long as you're getting in front of NFL scouts, that's a good thing. So yeah, man, that's awesome, man. More power to you. It's great.
Yeah, Kai. So I think that was a pretty overwhelming no answer. He never saw that name come across his face my senior year, 2017. Now, final thing for you. What have you thought of the college football season?
Well, that's a big open-ended question.
Well, how about this? Let's focus it in a little bit. What teams do you think can win the national championship as well? Because it feels like we've had a lot of parity in the SEC, Oregon and Ohio State very overwhelmingly at the top in the Big Ten. You have some teams. BYU just lost. Indiana's still kicking around there undefeated. I think that's sort of where I want to go with this. Who do you think's still in there and can actually win a national championship? It feels like it's a pretty wide array of schools compared to normal.
Yeah, I think when you look at who's going to win a national championship every year, all you have to do is look at which teams have the most pro prospects. It shakes out that way every year. When Alabama was on their run, they had the most NFL guys drafted basically every year. And right now, just based off our Senior Bowl invites and where we've got this thing graded, the three teams up at the top, and then there's a separation, are Ohio State, Oregon, and Georgia. To me, we sent 11 Senior Bowl invites to Columbus, Ohio, and the next most was, I believe, Georgia. That doesn't include the juniors. We can't invite the juniors until they declare for the draft. But again, to me, those are the three most talented teams in the country.
Yep, I hear you. Well,
I like that. What's your question? I got one more, then we'll get you out of here. About the proverbial SEC bias. Do you think that that's a real thing, or is the strength of schedule actually real? Or are you one of these people that believe that the SEC should add another conference game, or the non-conference that's been pretty, toughly scheduled is sufficient enough?
Yeah, I don't think they need to do anything to their schedule. Again, you put some of these other teams in the SEC that have 0 losses or a loss, they'd have 3 or 4 losses in the SEC. And again, I live down here in SEC country, but I'm a Big Ten guy. But it's hard to dispute the SEC is not the best conference. Year in and year out, the numbers are always around 20. A quarter of the draft comes from the SEC, from one conference. So, for people that are big fans of other conferences, that's great. Like I said, I'm a Big Ten guy, but the facts are the facts. The SEC, have the best teams year in and year out. They have the most pro prospects year in and year out. So hopefully a couple of those teams get in this playoff.
For sure. Well, Jim, I appreciate it, man. Thanks for carving out some time with us.
Yeah, guys, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. He's the executive director of the Reese Senior Bowl, Jim Nagy.
So shout out to Scottie Pippen Jr. Thoughts on Scottie?
He has impressed me a ton. I was a little worried coming out of the preseason. I was like, okay, now he's going against NBA guys. The summer league stuff doesn't look like nearly as good. And in the first game, I was like, still it looks like he's just gambling. He's getting all these fouls early. But credit to him, he keeps getting better. He keeps improving. The maturity is when he's playing behind Ja, I can go gamble. I can try and go get these steals. I can play sort of handsy defense. Because if I get in foul trouble, okay, what are they going to do? Switch back to John Morant? That's okay. Tonight, there are no other guards to come in behind him. Not really. It's point guard by committee to let Luke run it a little bit. But he knows he's got to be available. He doesn't get into foul trouble. And I think stuff like that says a lot about a player's maturity and understanding the role you're in on a given night. Dude, he's earned that NBA contract and more. Shout out to the Grizzlies getting another guy on a cheap contract.
Tune in to the Grizz 901 postgame show, live after every Grizzlies game on the Bluff City Media YouTube channel.
The Grizzlies have 3 bad home losses: Brooklyn, Chicago, and this one. We're too early in the season to have that many bad home losses.
Yeah, and the other thing for me is, I talk about the 10-game sets.
Right.
They're 2-3 in this 10-game set. They were 6-4 in the first one. I said, if you can go 6-4 for an entire year, and then win those 2 games, or at least split those 2 games, it puts you at 49 or 50 wins. And that you can feel good about that. And now you're 2-3, and you don't want to. Why you're saying that for me is you don't want to have to look back so many times and say, man, what if we would have?
And when you give games away, or don't take games that you feel like you should, you want to make those up somewhere else. And you just don't want that list to get too long. Well, check off the Chicago one, and then keep going down the list.
Tune in to the Night Court Podcast with your hosts, Rob Fisher and Brevin Knight, on the Bluff City Media YouTube channel.
Back in on G5 Classified. Let's go ahead and get into our G5 portion of the show. And this past weekend, if you stayed up late and drank your coffee, you got to see a absolute instant classic in New Mexico. New Mexico ended up beating number 18 team in the country, Washington State and John Mateer, 38-35. And this is year 1 with Bronco Mendenhall. So I want to start with him. He's always been a good coach. Did a good job at BYU, was okay at Virginia, but we've seen Virginia, fall off since he has left. It just didn't work out. And he's had some health scares here and there and some issues, in his life between now and then, or then and now. But what he's doing at New Mexico, I think, is being overlooked by a lot of people. Yeah. They have not made a bowl game since 2016. They're now 5-6 with a win over a top 25 team, according to the college football playoff. I'm impressed as hell with what Bronco Mendenhall is doing in year 1. And if you look at New Mexico, they have some runway to go do something. Their quarterback, who scored with 21 seconds to go, Devin Dampier, he had 193 yards and 3 touchdowns in this game against Washington State. He's only a sophomore. Eli Sanders is there, 943 yards so far this year. He added another 108. They were running the rock all day. He had a touchdown, and he's only a junior, so they have a little bit of runway with him. Program actually could turn it around the Mountain West, make it a lot more competitive. I'm impressed with that program.
Yeah, they've had some heartbreaker losses too. The loss they started the season with, I believe, was to Montana State, FCS team, but a damn good FCS team. But they've had some heartbreaking losses where they were in control or could have won that game, and didn't follow through. But I think he's done a fantastic job. I know our guy Colton Denning, he's been one that's been really raving about Bronco and watches their games and tells me about them all the time. So I'm excited for them because I like seeing programs like this resurrect themselves. Like, we're rooting for people like that. Everybody has good things to say about Bronco Mendenhall. He's a little bit more polarizing, but I think the next place Biff Poggi goes, people are going to root for Biff Poggi to win. Most people like Biff. They like the cutoff shirt and shit like that. So
if he gets a job, I don't know if he'll get a job anywhere meaningful, but we'll see.
But yeah, we love, the football community loves certain coaches and rooting for them, and Bronco is one of those guys. But I think it's another point. I hate to tie everything back into the playoff, but what do you think about a team like Washington State still being ranked after suffering a loss to a 4-16.
I don't feel great about it. Thanks for asking.
They're not even in a conference dependent on. Like whose resume are they boosting? Oh,
they're playing Mountain West teams. They're playing a Mountain West schedule. So no, I don't feel good about it.
So whose resume are they boosting? They're boosting Boise State's resume. Who
their win? Correct me if I'm wrong. Their marquee win would be Washington against Washington.
I believe so. Washington. And they played. They played Boise State close. So it's a Boise State prop up. I mean, Boise State and UNLV. Washington State and UNLV ranking high, huh?
Yep. But Davin Dampier, I want to get to this because he's got 2,600 yards passing and 1,051 yards rushing. He's rushed for 16 touchdowns. Dude's a dog. But it was kind of funny watching the whole second half. And obviously I was up late. Just, I'm a ball watcher. Well, that sounds kind of weird. Pause. But I was watching Davin Dampier, and they were just spamming power read and counter read the entire game. And just letting him go cook. And Washington State couldn't do anything to tackle. They couldn't get the guy on the ground. It's funny as hell. It was like you're playing it, college football 25, and you find someone's weak point and just keep clicking that and going into hurry up, running it again.
I love that.
But that's what that was.
I love it. Everybody's so gung-ho on trying to be a guru or doing the most extravagant thing. And sometimes if it ain't broke, don't fix it, man. Like, keep going.
Yep. For sure. Now, Boise State, speaking of which, you just brought up Washington State maybe bringing up their resume, seeing that they're still in the college football playoff, top 25. But they have a bye right now, and we sort of mentioned this earlier. Can they hold on to the bye and be a top 4 seed? They have to win the Mountain West Championship. That's the very least they have to do. But then it's going to come down to the Big 12 and how that figures itself out. I think personally – I actually think it's likely that they hold on to the bye game in the college football playoff, because I think those Big 12 teams, I guess BYU is the only one that can steal it, but I could see Colorado. I think it's conceivable, whether it's Colorado, Arizona State, or whoever. I could certainly see those teams handling business, getting in there and beating BYU in the Big 12 championship, and then Boise State would basically be locked in to getting that first round bye, which would be massive for them in the first year of the college football playoff being 12 teams.
Yeah, I think the likelihood they hold on to the bye is pretty good right now. If they don't run into UNLV again, I think it would be a cool thing to prop up their resume. But on the other hand, that's a team that could very well beat them. I would even lean towards UNLV in a rematch on another neutral site and give them a chance to maybe get into the playoffs themselves. I mean, if UNLV only has one loss and then they beat Boise State again at the end, what does that say for UNLV's chances? I mean, that would be interesting. But I also think that they need Washington State to hold firm. Washington State is ranked number 18 right now. If they have another loss, there's no way to justify keeping them in the top 25. UNLV,
there was a team that was supposed to be there that I was hoping was going to be there, and my University of Memphis. They got their 9th win against UAB this past weekend. But, I want to put it this way. I think Memphis is the college football oxymoron, where you're sitting there at 9-2, but is there such thing as a disappointing 9-2 season, or a 10-2 season, or a 9-3 season for the University of Memphis? Because I think that's what this is. The combined record or winning percentage of the 9 teams they've beaten thus far is .295, meaning they win 29.5% of their games. And when you look at their losses, you have no business losing to a Navy team who got beat by Rice, got blown out by Tulane, and can't give out NIL money. You have no business losing to a UTSA team who's 500 right now and has lost some nasty games this year. And, the week of the UTSA game, you hear their head coach saying, well, they have 6 times the amount of NIL resources that we do. And for me, the reason it's so disappointing, Kai, is this was supposed to be the year. You have experienced quarterback, experienced wide receivers. You have a running back coming in from an SEC program. And by the way, he's been great. Mario Anderson Jr. has been phenomenal, 1,000-yard rusher. Shout out to him. You had a bunch of guys on the defensive side of the ball that you brought in from the transfer portal that were wanted by other schools. You had everything there for you. And there's these checklist items that you always look for when you want to go win championships. And one would be resources. Memphis has that through FedEx, the NIL fund, all of the money that's pouring into that program. You have a great state-of-the-art indoor facility that was put up in the last 5 years. You have renovations being done on the Liberty Bowl. Then you go look at, a path. It's the easiest path in the world for them to go win a championship in the AAC. I mean, you're fighting against service academies, UTSA, teams like that. And if you look at the AAC right now, they've had 5 in-season coaching firings. They're going to have a 6th when it comes to Trent Dilfer and UAB, because that team is absolutely positively awful. I watched them lose 53-18 to this Memphis team this past weekend. But you keep going down this list, and you just check off all these boxes of like the reasons they should win a championship. And then you come back to the question of what's missing. What else do you need? And it's not a surprise that everybody points directly at the coaching staff and Ryan Silverfield, because you have all these things working in your direction. You have all these resources working in your favor, and you're still not getting through to sort of the minimum expectations of what you should be able to accomplish in the position you're in at this particular moment in time. It's just, if there is a college football oxymoron, that's Memphis. Disappointing 9-win team.
Yeah. And the thing that I think is the most valid part of the argument is that it's never going to get easier than it was this season. It's never going to be easier. Now, you can get better and overcome what is to come in terms of schedule and other people kind of catching up in terms of NIL or whatnot. But if they're staying put right now, nobody's going to catch up to them in NIL. They're going to have that advantage over people. They're going to have the recruiting advantage over a lot of people in terms of talent pool in the local area. Memphis is not far from, a nice pool in Mississippi and Alabama. They can still reach down into Louisiana and parts of Florida as well. It's never going to get easier than it was this year. So I think that's the most valid part of that. 9-2 is good, but 11-0 is better. So you had a very realistic chance to do that. And this is a system that would have enabled you to be in the thick of the college football playoff conversation. So I understand, like you said, it's an oxymoron. 9-2 for most people would be considered great, but look at it deeper, man. Like, it's okay. You said it before. It's okay to want more from your program. It's okay to demand more and to demand excellence.
Yes, especially when your fan base and your donors are the ones that want a little bit more, and they're giving you the resources to go make that happen. It's definitely a frustrating reality. And I get where it could be frustrating for Ryan Silverfield. I get it. You're winning 9-10 games the past 2 years. You won 10 games last year. It's the 4th time in program history. You win 9 this year. You have a chance to win 10, whether it's Tulane or the bowl game. And you're sitting here like, this is the 5th time this has happened in program history, and you're still shitting on me. You're still coming after me. Well, I mean, you gotta have nuance in these conversations. You have to understand where the frustration is coming from, and it's pretty obvious to me. Now, let's get to Army and Notre Dame. I don't necessarily give Army a great shot, but we know what the formula is. Don't turn the ball over like Navy did against Notre Dame. Control the ball, control the clock, get a couple of stops, try to pour it on early, because we don't want you. That's something you do very well. Get an early lead and try to hold on. That's what this formula is for Army to go spring this upset.
Make Riley Leonard and the Notre Dame offense beat you passing. That is the number one thing. You have to control the ball, not turn over the ball, do everything like you said, but you have to make them beat you passing. They're a pretty dynamic team rushing the football. Notre Dame can get after it up front. That offensive line has gelled over the course of the season. They have some nice backs. And Riley himself is a dynamic runner. I believe he has the team leading touchdown runs this season. He's up there in terms of quarterbacks in the country, him, Milroe, and the guy he's going against consequently in this game for Army. So make them beat you passing the football, and it enhances your chance to win the ball game, and take care of your possessions. Finish with scores at the end of the drive. Field goals, touchdowns, just finish with scores, and that'll be the recipe to get you with the win. And if they get a win, man, the conversation changes completely about the college football playoff.
Yes. What do you think? Okay, if they spring this upset, how high do you put them up in week 4 of the college football playoff rankings? That is an interesting question.
They have to. They got to be top 12. They have to be top 12.
Okay.
I would say baseline is 12. You have to put them at least 12. Tough, man.
This could get tricky as shit now that I'm thinking about it. Army holds on. Say they win out, beat Tulane in the conference championship. Boise State wins out. The Big 12 has that thing where Colorado gets in and BYU gets in. Colorado beats BYU. Remember, it's top 5 conference champions.
Put it this way.
You may have to just, like, if you're the Big 12, if this does happen and Army's able to go win the conference championship, you may be the 6th best conference champion on the outside looking in. That's
man.
crazy to think about. I don't expect that to happen, but it's a possibility.
But what would be the argument? Let's say Indiana loses to Ohio State, and not an ass whooping. Let's say 31-17 type of game. Respectable, but clear and decisive, and Army wins against Notre Dame. What would be the justification to keep Indiana above Army? Other than Big Ten bias,
I mean, well, you know what they do is they pull up the ESPN FPI page and start going strength of schedule, strength of record.
Now, so
all that
it
bullshit
matters for Indiana and those teams, but it doesn't matter for Georgia.
Right. Yes.
It's the toughest way it goes. So I'm actually low-key hoping
we're very selective about how we apply these things.
Yeah. I'm low-key hoping Army wins to get some chaos, but it is going to be a tough road. I do think Notre Dame is good enough to get it done and get it done convincingly. But there is a pathway, and if they follow the pathway, they'll have a chance.
Now, Group of 5 game of the week. I have to throw it into your corner. Here we go. Sam Houston visiting the Jacksonville State Gamecocks, 6-point favorites. This game, if it is won, Jacksonville State, if it's USA Championship game, and they're locked in. Holler at me.
Run the damn ball. That's all I got to say. I don't want to talk about anything else. I don't care about anything else. Run the damn ball, and Jacksonville State will be okay. And I think the -6 line is very generous for Sam Houston, especially kind of watching them play the last couple of weeks. They have a solid defense, but their offense hasn't been matriculating and scoring enough points like I thought they would. They're a solid team. They don't really beat themselves. They're an 8-2 team for a reason, but I think that is a generous line for Sam Houston, and I think they're going to run the ball, man, and score a lot of points against this defense. So I'm expecting a decisive Jacksonville State win. I'm not saying Sam Houston can't win because you can get your ass beat by anybody. I said it last week, and FIU almost beat Jacksonville State.
Yes.
They needed a fourth-quarter heroic.
Pissed me off, by the way. That was my big play of the day.
Right. So I said it last week before that game, and I got some Jacksonville State people kind of just saying, "Oh, you're just saying that you don't know." No, I really believed it, and that we had to play a 4-quarter ball game to beat them. So I think they'll be refocused this week. Rich Rod is really good at getting them to refocus and lock back in on what's important. And a chance to go compete for a conference championship is extremely important, especially when you put into the context that this is Jacksonville State's first season as an official FBS program. Last season, there was a probation year, and they were able to go to a bowl game. But if they're able to get to this Conference USA championship game, it could be the third different conference championship that Jacksonville State wins within the 6-year span. They won the OVC from 2013 to 2018, 5 years in a row. 2020, they won the ASUN, and this year they could potentially win the Conference USA. Remarkable stretch.
I'm not trying to shit on Sam Houston State by any stretch of imagination when I say this, but the way that both these teams run their offense is just about the same. They do the same things.
Yeah.
But Jacksonville State has the better talent, and they're better at it, and they have the more experienced coach at doing it. And I love Brad Cornelson. We got to talk to him a couple of weeks ago. Their OC over there at Sam Houston. But like Sam Houston State is kind of Jacksonville State light, the way they have played. But they've managed their schedule well. I mean, they're 8-2. You don't get to 8-2 by accident. They've just been good at limiting opportunities for other teams. They've won a couple of nasty games. I think they won a game 9-6 earlier in the year.
They just went to overtime.
They found a way. They have found a way. All right, now let's get into our picks for the week, and I'm going to start right there with my lock. How about it? For the second straight week, I'm going to take the ass-kicking Chickens -6. Again, I think Sam Houston State is Jacksonville State light. I think they have less talent. They have managed that talent really well. They've had a good season, but I think Jacksonville State's better at playing that type of ball than Sam Houston State is. But I will say this, Kai. If your ass-kicking Chickens don't come through for me this week, I'm done picking them for the rest of the time. Because last week, they fucked me. They bit me over a barrel.
Understandable. I get it. I'm going to go James Madison -7 against App State. And this game is a little bit walky, right? Like, historically, it's a very competitive game. But I think this is the worst App State team I've seen in a while. And this is, about close to the level of James Madison team that we've seen. So I think James Madison will win this game, a 31-21, 34-20 type of game. I think James Madison -7 is good value, and that's my lock of the week.
Explain this next line to me. My shock, I'm going to go with Wisconsin plus the 2.5. They're visiting Nebraska, but can you explain this line to me? I guess Wisconsin's coming off a really close game against Oregon where they thought they had it. They thought they could spring the upset. Maybe you'll have a letdown this week. But Nebraska has been playing like old Nebraska.
Yeah.
Like,
maybe they don't week 2 with Dana Holgorsen. The offense might progress a little bit, but
have you heard Dana Holgerson's like comments.
He's calling them soft, basically.
He's calling them soft, and then he said that there's a guy that's been redshirted and not playing that he's going to play this week, a guy that's way down on the depth chart that he's going to bring in to go play. He said that none of the receivers block downfield. Like, I don't know if like a guy coming in at that point delivering those messages late in the season when he's like been there for 3 weeks really resonates. Yeah. I think Nebraska is going to Nebraska this year, and I think that they'll miss a bowl, man. Like, I mean, you have Wisconsin and Iowa at Iowa to end the year. I mean, what started looking good, 5-1 with the win over Colorado, could end with you sitting at 5-7 with a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 game losing streak. Like, I fully believe that that's what's going to happen because I mean, as much as we've always talked about Nebraska getting back to old Nebraska, 90s Nebraska, early 2000s Nebraska, we have a long track record of them doing this shit consistently.
Yeah.
Losing close games, botching, getting into bowl eligibility against teams that they should beat. I feel like this is one of those spots. So I'm going to take Wisconsin plus 2.5. I'm honestly going to tell you to take a money line because I think that's a better value.
Yeah, I'm going to look it up real quick because I think it's important to say this for your point. You're talking about historically Nebraska bungling these type of situations. The last 9 games that they've played a team with an opportunity to be bowl eligible, they're 0-9 in those games.
Yeah, I know. Like, I wish I had that stat in front of me. That would have made me look a lot smarter, but now we have it.
0-9 the last 9 times to be bowl eligible is crazy. So 100%, I think that that's a team that is looking at they're looking at the end of the barrel right now, and it doesn't look good for Matt Rule because when you start that way and you kind of have the momentum, it's probably not going to get higher than getting a 5-star Dylan Raiola to come over there and commit to you. It's kind of a tough place to be in. But my shock of the week will be Florida plus 10. I think Florida plus 10 is great value. I mean, what do you think about that?
I like this one a lot. Honestly, I've seen your bonus too. I like your last 2 picks. They looked so good to me, I stayed away, if that makes sense. Like when a line tells me like definitively to pick one side, I just decide to step back for a second.
Yeah, man. And it's not like Ole Miss has been a very good team all year. They have not been a dominant, assertive team that we've seen against Georgia all year. The teams we saw against Georgia and Arkansas, one of the best 3 or 4 teams in the country I've seen this year. But they have had the LSU game. They have had the Kentucky game. They've had games where they haven't played up to the standard. And those have been home games. Or excuse me, one of them was a home game, one was on the road. But going into the Swamp with some momentum, with DJ Lagway at quarterback, with 10.5 points, hey, with Florida has everything to play for. Get into a bowl game after this schedule is everything to Florida. And they'll have Florida State the week after that. If Florida could somehow win this game and finish 7-5, you talk about some momentum rolling into the next season. Florida will have a ton of it. So I like this pick 10.5 points.
Yep. Now let's go ahead and get the bonuses. I have a really obvious one. Rice minus 6.5 at UAB is stealing money, brother. Yeah. UAB, I got to watch them last week. Kyron, they are awful. Trent Dilfer is a high school coach, man. Like, he's so bad. And like, it doesn't even look like he's giving effort over there, man. He's in there. He's down there with he's got the sweats on. He was wearing like the workout sweats on the sideline with his glasses. Like, it was just like it was practice or something. I'm like, what the hell is going on over there? And he's after the game, he was relying on his high school days. He was telling the Memphis and Birmingham media, well, I used to win a bunch of games here when I was a high school coach in the Memphis area. Or, he used to be in the Nashville area, I believe, and he won some games in Memphis as a high school coach in the Memphis area. But like, they're so bad, and UAB, the only thing they can do is air it out with Jalen Kitna, which him starting after what he was accused of a couple of years ago, why he had to leave Florida, that's a questionable decision anyway. But the only thing they can do is air it out, and Rice has a top 25 pass defense. Yeah, and Rice, Rice does. I'm not going to deny that. But UAB's defense will make up the ground there. They can't stop the run at all. They can't do it. So I mean, have more fans. I mean, at this point in the year, just like Rice is gonna or UAB is gonna play Charlotte last game of the year. Take Charlotte, whatever the number is, because this UAB team's checked out. Trent Dilfer is gonna get fired. He's checked out, and they're automatically terrible anyway. They don't have the talent, don't have the schemes, nothing redeeming about that UAB team.
They'll probably have more fans at the stadium than UAB as well because he's ruined the fan base. So
Right.
I like that pick. I think that's stealing money, like you said. I'm going to take Kentucky plus 20.5 at Texas, and simply because Kentucky has a pesky defense. Not many teams have just beat Kentucky convincingly.
This is the one I like even more than your first one. I like this one.
Man. I mean, if we're talking about a team that's solid in special teams, a team that has a really good defense and enough talent offensively with game breakers, with those guys on the outside and some of those receivers to make you respect them. You can't just send the house. This is a game. I'm not saying it's a trap game that Texas will lose, but giving me 20 points, damn right I love those 20 points. So bonus pick is Kentucky plus 20.5. Texas has not looked convincing all season. Their best game was against Florida probably, and that was without Lagway, so I'm not even counting that all the way. Give me Kentucky plus 20.5 as the bonus pick. We'll check back in on this one next week because I'm interested to see how that game plays out.
And by the way, have we talked about how lucky Texas is this year?
Oh, with their schedule, with the way it played out, ridiculous.
Like the shittiest Michigan team in recent memory, the shittiest Oklahoma team in recent memory. Even against Georgia, when you lost 30-15, it should have been a 55-14 blowout or 15 blowout because Carson Beck threw 3 picks and they still won 30-15. Then you get Florida with no DJ Lagway. Like they've gotten lucky as hell. They've gotten a lot of good breaks. A lot of good
100%,
breaks.
man. So I think this is a sneaky one for them. Sark, better handle business, bro. You're under the 8 ball.
Yep, for sure. For sure. All right, Kai, where they find you?
Find me on Twitter or X, whatever you call it, at Kyron Samuels. Just had to drop a bunch of stuff doing the Caleb Williams review for USC. So he's going up against Brian Flores' defense this weekend. So I'm really excited to see how Caleb progresses through that. So I wrote about that. Have a bunch of stuff coming out. USC is doing some cool stuff honoring Kobe Bryant this weekend with they're making some Kobe cleats and stuff like that. So really busy on that. Got some Oregon stuff. They're on a bye week, but I'm doing some NFL stuff with them with some Justin Herbert propaganda. They're going to big Justin Herbert up. So read that stuff. Subscribe to the Pull and Guard on Substack. Follow here. Give us a like, share, subscribe. Me and Gabe will be back on the radio 929 Memphis tomorrow. Thursday, every Thursday we'll be there. And thank you guys for listening and tuning in as always.
Yep. Holler at me 4 to 7. Monday through Friday, 92.9 ESPN, 92.9ESPN.com. Download the Odyssey app. Do all that good stuff. Check me out on my other podcast on the Believe in Bluff City Media Podcast Network, the On the Bluff podcast, every single Tuesday at noon. But do exactly what Kyron said. Follow us on Twitter at G5 Classified FB. Again, at G5 Classified FB. And go enjoy all the podcasts on the Believe in Bluff City Podcast Network. You have a bunch of Grizzlies content, Tigers content, all of that stuff, betting content, everything is there. Go to bluffcitymedia.co to find all of it and all the articles that have been written. But let's go ahead and say our goodbyes. We'll talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to this episode of G5 Classified. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a rating and a review wherever you download your podcasts. To watch this episode, head over to the Bluff City Media YouTube channel. We'll see you back here next week.